This room is going to feature quite a lot in the next few videos. I'm going to start off by doing some small jobs. I've done a lot of jobs in this room so far, including making the door over there, replastering that wall over there. The wall that's actually behind me is being completely stripped down. I've changed the plumbing on it, I've remade the door over there, and actually the window behind me, off camera about a year ago, I remade that window, double glazed it and put it together. And today we're going to do a small little job. What we're going to do is we're going to put a windowsill in there. And I thought that I would show you how to make your own windowsill and how to fit it. So this is that video. So this is the window that I made. And if you look at the bottom of the window frame, you can see where I cut this dado in this groove here. And the idea being is that when we make the windowsill, we can actually fit it in and there'll be a physical connection between the windowsill and the window frame, which means that it shouldn't move apart. So let's measure this up and get started. So the overall maximum width doesn't really want to be any bigger than about 62. And the total depth, bearing in mind that we're going to recess slightly into here, is going to be about 17. So 62 by 17. This is a piece of pine that was in my parents' garage when I was a little boy. That's quite an interesting grain pattern that it's got. So this is what we're going to cut it out of. I can't think of anything better to use it for. And chopping this up to size and then ripping a clean edge on the table saw before finally cutting it to its width and then going over it. I think I went over it with 120 grit, went over it twice to clean it up, and it was lovely, you know, seeing the real wood come out. And you'll see it's a bit patchy. I mentioned this later. It's almost like I suppose like an oxidization layer, and then putting the largest roundover bit that I've got on it, and I set the bearing so that it was flush with the fence because I didn't want any shiny bit showing on the front of it. And then on the sides I've only really half done it because I know that the rest of it's going to get notched out and cut when it's actually fit into the wall. And you could have just used a board, or you could have bought a bit. A ball nose finish on it, which we've done obviously on the router table. And there's different colours to this. I mean, it looks a lot brighter there than it does there. And I'm sanding, and I think that sort of staining in the timber, I think that's kind of part of the game really. I think that's sort of part of the picture. This is obviously before it's had any kind of finish on it or stain. Probably going to just go for bry wax, to be fair, along with all the other windowsills that I've done. And that just makes it very easy to repair. You can just see that hole there. That's remains of an old nail hole that goes all the way through. And I'm not going to attempt to fill that yet. And the reason being is that I've probably got to notch a section of this out, and it's quite possible that that might be removed. And even if it isn't, I've oversized this. I might be able to swallow that up, and it might get hidden by the wall. And the other option is that if it is visible, that when I have to cut small sections out of here, I can then use that material to make a plug in order to fit that. Okay, so that's like a halfway mark. What I want to do is I want to mark a halfway point on this. So we've got, I'm going to do this in inches because it's bang on 26, so therefore 13 is the middle of it there. Right. That shows me that that hole there is actually inside that line there. So that's actually going to get absorbed and we're never going to see it. So I need to notch out into here so that this fits into this wall here because it's a bit wider. So I'm just going to make a rough mark like that. And again, the same thing, we're just going to rough mark that there, something like that. Okay, so when it comes to measuring the depth of this, we know that we've marked here, and this is what we're going to cut. But we also want to know how deep we're going to go. And I've measured this, and I know that this is 10 mil or 1 centimetre deep. And I can see that the reveal here is 13 centimetres deep. So in total, this is going to sink in up to the base of that little section in there. That's going to go in a total of 14 centimetres. So if we cut this to a total of 12 centimetres What that means is that by cutting it to 12 centimetres, it means there'll be at least a couple of centimetres underneath here, so we'll get the appearance of a nice solid bit of timber. And so this has to be trimmed off, this section here. You could have done this with a jigsaw, you could have done this with a bandsaw, you could cut this a number of ways, but quite frankly for the speed and time it takes, handsaw. Having offered the windowsill up, I end up seeing this little section here, and I need to trim that out to about 2 centimetres in depth on both sides, and that will just give me the opportunity to sink this in so that you've got the appearance of a nice wide board that goes all the way through. I could have chiselled this out beforehand, but I didn't really know what I was going to make, and I didn't know how I wanted it to look, so it didn't make any difference. Take your time on this. You don't really want to crack bricks or knock off any plaster, and constantly keep cleaning, because you only need a little bit of grit to sit there, and then when you put the sill back on again, it'll appear on level. So having notched out both these corners now, I've just put a pencil underneath here and I've just checked it for level. Just wants to go up a little bit on the right hand side, and that looks good, so that's level. So we now know that these registration marks line up, so we know that this thing is centrally placed, and what we need to do now is to cut a little bit of material off the very top of this and the bottom of this to basically create a tongue to fit into the groove that's on this side here. And I think the sensible way to do this is, because obviously I can't see where the groove is on the back, and this is quite restricted in height movement, is I'm going to put a little mark there, another mark there, another mark there, and then when I remove, if I take the square end of this offcut, okay, so if I offer that up against it, it tells me. So if I make a little mark there, that I need to trim away that section there and that section there. So I can now take those marks and I can transfer them onto the back of that board, and I don't have to go full depth. I just want something physical to butt up against in there. So that's the next job. So I think we'll do that on the router table. Off camera, I've notched out just a little bit extra, and the reason that I've done that is that this, or the removal of that little piece of wood there, corresponds to the actual width of the frame, and because as I push this back into the wall there's a bit of mortar sticking out here, it's just easier for me to remove that. So I've drawn a T, and that means that's the top. So if I take that there and I transpose that line onto that side and onto that side there, so I need to remove that material there and that material there, and I only need to do this to, well, whatever it is, it has to be less than 1 centimetre, because that represents the depth that we've got of the groove that goes in the very base of the window frame. So that's the next job. We do that on the router table. There's a quick pit stop change here to change over to just a large flat cutting bit. So I need to move that down until we are level with that mark that I've put on there, like that. And we are. So now I can cut that side, making sure that the depth of the cut, i.e. how far away the fence is, has got to be less than 1 centimetre. And we can see that we've removed that material now. So I've got to change this around and reset the depth in order to correspond to that line there. So now we've cut that tongue. That tongue will fit nicely into that groove which is on the base of the frame. And that. So now that tongue is engaging in the groove, registration mark is in the centre. That's nice and level. This will be a lot easier to fix because it's no longer floating in a mouth on either side. It's got a tongue fitting into a groove, so that makes it nice and solid. We've got a bit of a lean here, and the actual thing is leaning up. And so what I might do is, as I look underneath it, I can see a high spot here. And so if I trim that off, I can get this. I can get it so it's level in both planes. That's what we need to trim off there. It wasn't just that little bit. It was actually in the left corner that you can see. It's rising as it goes towards the inside of the brickwork, and that's the bit that I eventually worked out. Again, cleaning, because you just need a little bit of a grit, and it dramatically changes the level. And I made that mistake in the past where I've been hammering away with a bolster needlessly. So a hoover is an ideal tool. So after all that work, we've managed to get this completely plumb in both of its planes. So we'll stain this, but as well as staining this, and when we stain this, we're going to stain all of this, because what I want to do is I want to seal the wood everywhere so that it doesn't absorb moisture from underneath or through the bricks, because there's no damp proof in this house. This cottage is, 160 odd years old or something like that. No damp proof on the front. There's a possibility that you could get a bit of moisture in these bricks. So what we'll do is we will seal, as I've done with all of the filling that I've done here when I put this window in. I would spray the walls with a solution of Unibond and water, and then after the filler has dried, I then spray that with Unibond and water. And what it means is that there's no filler left on my hand, so it makes it easy to paint. It stops any kind of absorbance. And I'll do the same thing down here. So I'll spray this lot with Unibond and water, and then I'll put a finish on this in preparation for basically sticking this in place. You could varnish this, you could use Danish oil, you could use wipe-on polyurethane, you could stain it and then polyurethane it. The options are endless. I chose Bry Wax purely and simply because it's incredibly easy to just take a scraper to it or sand it and then re-wax it. That is a dramatic transformation from the original piece of wood we started with, and it can be returned to that with just a fresh coat of wax. PVA Unibond. This is just an old, like shower spray bottle. I've just reused it, repurposed it. Put some Unibond in here, say about that much. With some more water. This is probably a bit of a trade secret and used by lots of builders and decorators. It's a fantastic way to save on paint, and it's also a great way to inhibit moisture in the walls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide in and I'm going to fit the windowsill. And then I'm going to mix up some filler, the same filler that I filled in these reveals with, and then I'll pack it in all the way around. I'm not going for the perfect finish first time. I'm expecting to do this in 2 fills, so time lapse and fitting and filling. Make sure that your filler is mixed up like stiff mashed potato. Take your time, don't rush it, don't get greedy trying to fill too much. And I'm really packing it in, despite the way that looks. That's being packed in, and I might get away with this. I probably won't need to fill it again. Any damage or marks that I cause through the filling process or the sanding process can easily be removed, and I can re-wax it. You can see me using a painter's fitch here. I've just damped it with water so I can literally scrape off the dust and the dirt. That's the rough fill, and then we'll put the final fill on. The joint towards the frame, that little groove that we fitted the tongue from this windowsill into, has given it a beautiful finish, and it all looks very nice. So all it needs now is sanding and painting, but that really is how to make your own windowsill. Simple, bull-nosed, recessed, a little bit sticking out either side, just like you would expect on all the traditional windowsills. Here we go. And that is a great sense of achievement. I've made the window, I've made the window frame and the windowsill, and done a significant bit of plastering on that wall, so I'm very happy with the way this has turned out. It's a nice easy job, it's nice and quick.